Change is as good as a holiday. That's the saying, right? But it's totally not true when it comes to your team. You've tried to introduce a change within your team, and instead of momentum or people being excited, you felt resistance. Maybe it was a new process, a new SOP, a new expectation, a shift in priorities, or even a conversation about improving how the team works together. But instead of people leaning in, something subtle happens. People become quieter, a little slower to respond, and very hesitant. Sometimes change in leadership doesn't create excitement, it creates tension. And as a leader, that can feel incredibly heavy because you want to lead wisely, you want to bring improvement, but you also don't want your team feeling overwhelmed or resistant. So today we're going to talk about how leaders can guide a change in a way that builds clarity and trust instead of pressure and confusion and frustration. Let's dive in. Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Woman of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in. Now, before we dive in, I want to mention something that may help you if you've ever found yourself thinking, I know what needs to be said, I'm just not sure how to say it. Whether you're introducing change, addressing a problem, or clarifying expectations, difficult conversations are part of leadership. That's why I've created the Difficult Conversations Script Pack. It gives you practical scripts for real leadership moments, including addressing performance concerns, responding when people become defensive, navigating tension or gossip within a team, and clarifying expectations clearly and professionally. These scripts help you approach conversations with calm authority and Christ-centered wisdom. Simply go to womanoffaithinleadership.com/conversation to grab your script back today. Leading change is one of the most challenging parts of leadership, not because the change itself is always difficult, but because people respond to change in very different ways. Some people feel energized by new direction. Others immediately feel uncertain and negative. Some worry about what the change means for their role, whilst others worry about whether they will succeed in the new environment. Sometimes leaders interpret resistance as opposition. Okay, I know it's hard when people oppose you or resist you. However, when in reality, people are experiencing simple uncertainty. When people feel unclear about what is happening or why it matters, they naturally become cautious. And that caution can look like resistance. One of the most important things leaders can do during times of change is replace uncertainty with clarity, because clarity builds confidence, and confidence reduces resistance. Now, before I talk about the 4 ways leaders can guide change without creating overwhelm or resistance, I want to mention a couple of examples of change. So one of the biggest changes for employees is when there's a new leader. For example, when you are the new leader. So when you're in a brand new leadership position, it doesn't help you come in and you immediately start changing everything. To you, it's exciting that you can come in and you can come and change things. But to them, it's extremely stressful because, especially if there was a high turn staff over of leadership, for example, maybe they've had 3 leaders in a year. I knew for me, when we had a principal change, that was very, very tough because the principal of a school can make or break the environment. You also didn't know what changes the principal were going to put in. Personally, when I was still teaching or when I was in a director's role at a private school, I both had a direct line manager change. My line manager was the principal of the primary school, so I had a principal change there. But I also underwent a college principal change, and that was from kindergarten all the way up to year 12. So we had 2 principals, primary school and secondary school, and then a main principal who was over everyone. And in the 5 years that I worked at that school as a director of an early learning center, I was basically the principal of the nursery school in some terminology. I both experienced a line manager change, which was the principal of the primary school, and also a principal of the college change. So in those 5 years, I experienced twice a leadership change. It was very tough to have those leadership changes because your direct line manager works differently from your previous line manager, and the principal of the school works much differently from the previous principal. They bring different levels of experience, different levels of knowledge, and they want to exercise that. That's why the board of directors employed them. And so it can be very, very stressful, all right, if there's a new line manager. So that is one example. Another example is when you are implementing new policies and procedures. So this happened quite often in my specific role. Because I brought my own level of skill and knowledge, I implemented new policies and procedures, new SOPs. And this could be quite overwhelming for the team. I am going to explain how I went about that, not just yet. I'm just using this as an example now. But those SOPs meant a change in how people had to do things from day to day. So again, that can be quite stressful for people if they've done a procedure from A to Z a certain way, and now all of a sudden you are jumbling up the letters, but you're also adding new ones. So it can be quite stressful. Some other examples of change is when, let's say, for example, there was an incident, something happened, an employee got hurt, or for example, at a school, a student gets hurt, then there needs to be a change in practice as well. People need to be made aware of what went wrong. Maybe the sandpit wasn't clean. I'm just thinking of some examples. Maybe the sandpit wasn't cleaned properly. There was sand lying on the cement and a child fell and slid or something like that. Simple example, but just trying to think about some different examples. So there are many reasons why things need to change. Maybe there's a new board of directors. Maybe there's a new head of the board of directors and they would like to implement some things. So we just have to realize that there are so many changes that can happen. And as the middle leader, as middle management, our role is to learn what needs to change, but also to implement it effectively. So let's talk about those 4 ways that we can implement change effectively. Now, the number one thing you have to do with people is before you explain the procedure, before you explain the change, you start with the why. People rarely resist change simply because they dislike improvement. That's not the reason why. However, what they do struggle with is that they don't understand the reason behind the change. When leaders clearly explain the purpose behind the decision, people begin to see the bigger picture. So instead of thinking, why are we doing this? They start thinking, okay, I understand what we're trying to achieve here. It might still be hard for me, but because I understand the why, I will try and implement this. So a good example again is one of in our IT department. They had decided along with the board of directors that they were going to change all the devices that we were using. We were all using MacBooks, and then they changed us all to Surface Pros. Okay, now if you understand the frustration, when I started at that company, I was a Windows girl. I only knew Windows. I started at that company and then I had to learn how to work with an Apple and with a MacBook. It was so frustrating. That change of Windows to MacBook was awful. Okay. Now I absolutely love my MacBook. I've gotten used to using my MacBook. And then all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, 3 years later, they're changing us over to Surface Pros. Now we're going back basically to Microsoft, to Windows, and now we no longer use Apple. Now we're using these Microsoft devices. So it was super frustrating. Everybody was oohing and eyeing over the fact that we were getting brand new devices. I think that was the excitement of it all, was that we're all getting these brand new devices to use for work. But the frustration lay in the fact that a lot of people were used to the MacBooks and nobody wanted the change. We didn't have a choice. We had to. And I actually, the MacBook that I'm using right now to record this podcast on is actually the MacBook that I had when I started at that company. So this MacBook is now 8 years old. Probably time to get a new one, but I love the MacBook so much that I just couldn't. I actually bought it from them. So so even that was a bit of a change for me, but I didn't want to because I really liked the MacBook. So yeah, anyway. Okay, I understood why we had to do it, but it was very frustrating. Okay, I understood and I was on board with it, but yeah, anyway. As you can see, I still loved my MacBook. I didn't want to change that. So okay, number 2, communicate early and often. When change is introduced suddenly, people often feel caught off guard. So to continue the Surface Pro and the MacBook example, they communicated with us about 6 months in advance that they were planning on switching over from MacBook to Surface Pro. With that change, there was also quite a lot of things that were going to happen. Instead of having the external hard drives and the cloud where we stored everything, we now moved to Microsoft Teams, which meant that we are literally storing every single little thing on Microsoft Teams and no longer on our iCloud devices, or on our iCloud, and then backing that up to the external hard drive. So again, that was a huge IT change. We were probably about 500 people that they had to make that change for. So I can just imagine the amount of kickback that the IT team got from people who were doing, let's say, for example, they were working at that company for 10 years. They've been using MacBook and iCloud for 10 years, and now all of a sudden they have to switch to Surface Pros. There would have been a lot of frustration there. Then having to move everything over to Microsoft Teams. Now all of a sudden you've got everything sitting on a server like Microsoft Teams. I felt, well, like, what if Microsoft Teams crashes? I had all these questions, but apparently IT had sorted all of that out and they had made sure that that wouldn't happen. Okay, so they communicated 6 months in advance with us. We could have a lot of questions, but it was only really when you got your Surface Pro that the questions then started. But again, we were all prepared. So there was a space for questions. We all had to sign terms and conditions for using the new Surface Pros. They sent us through training. We did training with our new devices, and they communicated very, very clearly. This week you've got to back up this. This week you've got to transfer this over to Teams. This week you've got to do this. This week you've got to do that. So the process was extremely clear, and they made the transition very, very easy. So go IT team, you did a great job. Number 3. Expect emotional responses. People are going to be upset, and I know that there were people that upset. Internally, I was very upset over changing from a MacBook to a Surface Pro, but I was emotionally mature enough not to show that, to just keep it for myself, okay? But change is rarely just logistical. It's actually an emotional thing. People do not like change. Even positive changes can trigger anxiety. People may worry about their ability to adapt, their place within the team, and how expectations may shift. Healthy leaders recognize this and respond with patience and empathy. Acknowledging the emotional side of change builds trust with your team. So look, there are some logistical things that you need to do. I'm running through them now, but it's more about like I said, change is rarely just logistical, okay? So, make sure that you communicate early. Make sure that you understand that there will be an emotional response. And then number 4, reinforce the vision moving forward. One conversation rarely settles a season of change. Leaders must continue to reinforce the vision. You need to remind the team why the change matters, what success looks like, and how the team will move forward together. Consistent leadership communication helps people move from uncertainty to confidence. And so when you're going through a change, is that you need to provide a timeline to your team. Literally, this in the same way that the IT team provided a timeline for us to move over from our MacBooks to our Surface Pros. They kept on continuing to communicate, okay, guys, today you need to do this. And they also even was so fantastic. We had to schedule a time to go and swap our devices. So they had a booking system, and we could go and swap our MacBooks for our Surface Pros. We had to sign it. They gave us a quick run through of how it all worked, what was all the additional things that we got with our Surface Pros, like the cover and the keyboard, the pen, and whatever else they gave to us. And then from there, we had a timeline of, okay, now we have to do this, now you have to do that, now you have to do that. And the way that they managed it was so smoothly. So when there's a change coming, don't just jump or spring it on your people. Please don't do that. Build a project board out. And I really like the project boards where you show the timeline. I can't think of the name of those project boards now. But really go and build out a project board where you say, okay, there's a change that needs to occur. This is the reason why we're doing the change. This is the timeline that we're going to follow the change. And I really want you guys to come with questions before this date so that we can iron out all those hiccups, iron out all those issues, and implement this change. Another good thing is bring your leadership team on board. If you do not have a leadership team, I would highly recommend that you include trusted people in your team that you can have as a leadership team, even if they're in a leadership position or not. Just remember, you are not the only one with influence in your team. You actually have other people on your team that might have even more influence than you. Bring them into your team and say, you are my trusted few. I trust everybody else, but I need you guys to step up and help me with certain things. It makes them feel wanted. It makes them feel special. And if there are ever any new leadership positions coming up, you can recommend one of them because you've been investing in them as a leadership team. Your leadership team can also then help you implement that change. Because when people get negative behind your back, your leadership team will have your back and say, guys, remember, this is why we're doing this. Remember what Rika said. She said that we're doing this because of that. Yes, we might feel negative, but this is the reason why we're doing the change. And when we have gone through the change, it's going to feel so amazing. So I'm going to quickly recap for you. Start with the why, number 1. Communicate early and often, number 2. Expect emotional responses, number 3. And finally, reinforce the vision moving forward. That's number 4. Bring in a leadership team. I didn't officially put this in the as a number, but bring your leadership team in. Make sure that you've got a project board that communicates the change, and communicate. Very important. Now, if you've been leading change within your team and you've been wondering how to communicate clearly without sounding harsh or creating tension, the Difficult Conversations script pack can 100% help you with that. Inside, you'll find practical scripts for common leadership situations so you don't have to wonder what to say in difficult moments. The goal isn't to make conversations mechanical. It's to give you a clear starting point so you can lead with confidence, wisdom, and calm authority. Now, the script pack does have 6 different scripts in there. I am actually in the process of updating it and adding more scripts. So you'll have lifetime access to any other scripts that I do add there as well. So I'm working on adding some more scripts in there. There's not only 6 difficult conversations that we have many more. So go to womenoffaithinleadership.com/conversation and you will be able to purchase the Difficult Conversation script there. I'm also excited because I've got a brand new member portal. So anything that you buy moving forward will be in a member portal where you'll be able to access all your resources and any updates that go with those resources. So that's very exciting. Now, in closing, I want to say leading through change is rarely easy, but it is one of the moments where leadership matters most. It is when leaders bring clarity, wisdom, and calm direction, teams begin to move forward with greater confidence. Remember that people don't simply follow strategies. They follow the leader who implements those strategies. And also, they trust the leader who implements those strategies. Trust grows when leaders communicate clearly, listen wisely, and guide people with steady conviction. God equips leaders for seasons of change, and so He will also equip you. He provides wisdom for decision, and He strengthens us to lead faithfully through uncertainty. You are more prepared than you realize. So lead with clarity, lead with courage, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the next episode. Bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.